All right. Are we ready? All right. Hi, my name is Drew Streicher, and I'm going to talk about encryption tonight. And a little bit about me. I am a systems administrator for Hurricane Labs. We're a Cleveland-based network security company. I'm a hardware hacker and a chip musician. I also collect arcane technology and try and put Linux on it because why not? And I also collect vinyl records. I'm going to talk tonight a lot about very, very basic encryption stuff. I really want this to be like an intro to encryption because it's big and scary when you're first looking at it and you're like, how do I do this? What does this mean? What does this mean? So I kind of wanted to make a very basic, intro to encryption because I think it's very important. So when we talk about encryption, what are we talking about? Like, what is it for? And a lot of people think that encryption is for security, and that's not necessarily true. A bad password encrypted is still a bad password. A bad program that uses encryption is still a bad program. If you have a security hole, encrypting it doesn't make it any more secure. Encryption is basically for privacy. It is for peace of mind of knowing your information is where it needs to be and that you have access to it and you can control that access to it. And this is why it's important, so that we can hold on to our information and make sure that we know where it goes, who it goes to, and that we can essentially keep it to ourselves and keep it private if we wish to. So what does encryption look like? When we talk about encryption, we're talking a lot about three things, three main terms that you'll hear: plain text, cipher, and ciphertext. The plain text in this is secret, so just the word secret. And then it's being the cipher, which is just the complex math that turns it into the ciphertext, which turns it into this gibberish, is called SHA-512. There's different kinds. There's RSA, DES, SHA-1. There's all kinds of different ciphers, and basically they kind of give you the same thing. They take your plain text and spit it out into ciphertext, which is just a series of complex letters and numbers and symbols and stuff. Encryption is very hard. I'm not a math person. I don't understand the math behind encryption, but I can kind of explain it a little bit. It uses something called one-way functions. And the best way that I've heard to describe a one-way function is if you gave two people two phone books, and the first person wrote a secret message and took that letter and say it was like the letter A was the first one. And then they went to the first letter of the last person's last name in the phone book and took that phone number and wrote it down on a piece of paper. And they did this for their whole message, and then they gave their piece of paper to the next person. Next person could go through the entire phone book and find that phone number for the letter A and trace it back to the letter A. So they're really easy to make, but they're very hard to pull apart. And that's the way one-way functions work. They use prime numbers and a lot of multiplication and factoring. And I don't like math. So when we talk about encryption, it sounds really difficult. You've got all these things. You've got ciphertext, and what are all these scary words that he just said? And you're using encryption every day. You just don't realize it, or maybe you do. So we're going to talk about the difference between HTTP and HTTPS. And this is kind of an easy way, and I can show you using lolcat. So HTTP is your standard web thing, and you type in lolcats.com, and it takes you and gives you these funny pictures of cats that we all love and trade. And that's fine if you're going to lolcats. Nobody really cares. Hey, do you really care if you know that I'm going to lolcats to look at these funny pictures? Not really. Not a big deal. But say you want to go to your bank website. Maybe it's not a good idea that anyone could listen in and figure out what your password is. So maybe you want to encrypt that. So that's what HTTPS is. The S stands for secure, and what it does is it encrypts all the traffic between your computer and the server. So if there was anyone listening in, all they would get would be gibberish. They wouldn't be able to tell that you're going to lolcats or your bank or whatever you prefer. The next section, we're going to talk about Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob are kind of like the typical when you talk about cryptography and encryption, these are the examples that you always use. We're going to meet Alice and Bob. This is Alice, and this is Bob. Alice has a very secret message that she wants to tell Bob. She doesn't want anyone to know, especially not Eve, because Eve might like Bob too. So Alice wants to keep this message only for Bob. She doesn't want Eve to listen. So what does she do? She decides to encrypt this message and send it to Bob. She's going to use something called symmetrical encryption, which is just a basic password. So she's going to use a password, swordfish, and encrypt the message to Bob. So she encrypts the message and she sends it to Bob. And Eve, if she intercepts it, she can't really do anything with it because it's all gibberish. But when Bob gets it, he knows the password, so he can unencrypt it and read it in the clear text. And then he knows that Alice wants him to be his soulmate. A real-world example of this is full disk encryption or disk encryption. If you have a laptop, let's say, and you have your super secret password on there that protects all your files and everything, and that's great. If you're not encrypting your drive or your directory itself, if you were to lose your hard drive or your laptop or somebody were to steal it, they could very easily boot and access your entire drive without any problem. It would take a couple minutes and it would be very, very easy to get. What encryption does is it makes it private by encrypting all of that information. You can do what's called full disk or just a folder or two. Full disk is probably what I would recommend. It basically does the entire drive, whereas some other things would do just what are called your home directories. So you're like My Documents and all of that stuff. The tools that we use for disk encryption are Lux under Linux, FileVault under Mac OS X, and BitLocker under Windows. These are all built in for the most part to all major operating systems. Lux, you might find some variations between the weirder strains of Linux and Red Hat. I don't really know. And then if you're looking for more folder-based or areas that you can control what you want to encrypt, if you just want to do files and stuff, or even if you do want to do full disk encryption, but you don't want to use these tools, I recommend a program called TrueCrypt. It's open source, and it's very user-friendly and very nice. So now we're going to talk about asymmetrical encryption. We're talking about symmetrical encryption where we're basically just using a password to protect a file. And that's really, really great if Alice and Bob know the password and if they can share it. But what if Alice and Bob have never met? They've never met. Somehow they're soulmates. And they want to get this message across, but they've never met. So how can they agree on a password that when they don't know each other? They're going to use something called asymmetrical encryption. The greatest example of this is called PGP. And what we do is we make a key, and this key is broken into two pieces. You have a public key and a private key. The private key would sit on your laptop, whereas the public key would be uploaded to what's called a key server, which is a public repository for all these people's keys. So you can go to a key server, search, find Bob, pull down his key, find Alice, pull down her public key. So that's what they do. They trade these keys, and Alice will end up with Bob's public key. She has her public key, and she has her private key. Bob, on the other hand, will have his public key, her public key, and his own private key. Because of this, Alice can encrypt a message using Bob's public key, since she knows it, and then send it to him. Then when he gets it, because of the way that the keys work, he will decrypt it with his private key that is only accessible to him on his machine. Again, this is another way of keeping data private, and if Eve got in the middle of this conversation somehow, she would just get gibberish. Creating keys is probably the first step, and there are a bunch of different programs you can use. For Linux, again, you can use GNU PGP. For Mac, GPG tools. GPG for Win. These are all graphic GUI things. If you don't like GUIs, I'm not that big of a fan. You can also use command line tools. On most versions of Linux and Unix, I think in OS X, you can just type in GPG --gen-key, and that'll walk you through it. It'll ask you a series of questions like your name, your email address, what algorithm you want to use to encrypt it, that sort of thing. If you really just want a one-stop shop, I recommend using Thunderbird, and there's a plugin called Enigmail. And Enigmail will handle all of the key creation. It'll upload it to the key servers. It'll also let you find your friends and download their keys and store and manage the keys. It's really, really nice. It's basically a one-stop shop for encrypting any kind of email. Web-based clients are kind of interesting because they don't natively support encryption. For instance, Gmail, because of how Google searches your email to pull out relevant ads, they don't want you to encrypt it, through their web face, because then they can't pull out the ads. So they don't natively support it. However, you can use a program like Thunderbird, which will pull down your email, let you compose, let you send and decrypt and encrypt emails. You can also do it manually. If you encrypt a message, copy, paste it in there, send it, somebody can then pull it out and decrypt it, and vice versa. They just don't manually support it as well as something like Thunderbird. Encryption is really all about privacy, and an important aspect of that is what are you putting out there. It really doesn't do a whole lot of good to encrypt something and to keep something super secret if you're putting the same information in public spaces. We talk a lot about privacy and privacy concerns, and then at the same time we go and post very intimate, very private things on Facebook and Twitter and social networking. I don't think those are necessarily bad things, but they are something to consider, especially if you're worried about privacy to the point that you're encrypting stuff. Then you have to also think about, well, what am I putting out in the public sphere? A good rule of thumb that I've heard and that I use is if you don't feel like you could safely write it on the back of a postcard and send it through the mail, then it probably should be encrypted. And if you don't feel comfortable and safe sending that through the mail, you probably shouldn't be saying it in an online presence that's not protected with the same safeguards as encryption. So I think encryption is very good and privacy is very important. Privacy will only work as far as you take it. And that's really all I have. I have some links here. The Crypto Party has more walk you through guides. I went over stuff very, very brief because I really want to take some questions if people have them. The Crypto Party guide has basically a downloader's guide, a download guide that will walk you through setting up Enigmail, setting up Thunderbird, setting up keys and that sort of thing. And the Beginner's Guide to Encryption is good, just overall view. I put 2 books up there that are very good resources, and then the third book is just a very good very good fiction book. It has good story, but they weave in a lot of encryption stuff and basics, and it's a good book, and you should read it. So, any questions? Anyone? Bueller? Yes. I haven't read that one. Tell me about it. Any other questions? What was that? Why encrypt things? Oh, why in general? Why not? That's more of a philosophical question, isn't it? This is true. Things like PayPal and secure. That's another good point I should bring up. If you're putting your credit card or any information online, it's a good thing to always look in the corner of your browser. Most of them will now have a little green box that says HTTPS. Because you're sending your credit card and other sensitive information, you want to make sure that it's HTTPS. So if you look in your browser in the corner, it'll have usually a green box that says HTTPS. and lets you know that it is secure and that your information is then encrypted from your computer to their servers. So, yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Are you using any kind of disk encryption? Yeah, TrueCrypt. I mean, that's a really, really good place to start because especially if you're taking information from, a server or a network somewhere and putting it on your laptop. We hear stories all the time of somebody losing their laptop or the laptop gets stolen and it has, 2 billion social security numbers and credit card numbers, and you think, well, why does that person have all of that information on there? Encryption is a very, very good place for that because you're preserving the confidentiality of that information. Another thing is you said that you were using 2 passwords. Are you saying like 2-factor? Oh, yeah, and I mean I wouldn't say be in a state of paranoia, but be aware of it. Exactly. 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 That's a great way of doing it. Yeah, triple des. No. Yeah. They could be different ciphers. Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, I think that's what we're seeing with, the rise of, I hate to use the term cloud because it's always been in the cloud, and well, with the rise of things like Box or Dropbox or even Google Docs and that sort of stuff, is like they don't natively support encryption a lot of times, but they will support encrypted files. So if you put an encrypted file up on Google Drive, you might not be able to decrypt it there, but you can download it and decrypt it, and it will work, and it will, maintain your privacy. and that sort of thing. But yeah, so I think TrueCrypt is very good for that sort of thing. But I mean, it sounds like just being aware that I have these confidential things on my hard drive and I really want to keep them secure and safe, and that you're using TrueCrypt. It sounds like you're on the, doing the right thing. Yeah. Exactly. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks to Notacon, and I'm not going to say Notacon, I'm going to say Notacon. Ian Gillespie, who's the designer at Hurricane Labs, for the great slides and wonderful cartoons and drawings. For technical questions, LOL, cat pictures, jokes, whatever, that's my email address, and that's my PGP public key. So if you want to send something encrypted to me just to do it, send it to me. And these slides and everything are also going to be at hurricanelabs.com for download. And thank you.